Who are the players most likely to become all-stars in the 2024 NBA draft class, according to James Barlowe? Find out next, right here on Locked On NBA Big Board. Hello and welcome into Locked On NBA Big Board. I'm Leif Thulin, joined by James Barlowe. I'm excited for this episode. We worked together last week for the first time. Felt like it was fun, and we talked about guys with the most potential to be stars as just kind of part of our exercise of debating. This time we're going to be ranking all-star potential, and we wanted to thank you before we get into that for making us your first listen each and every day. It means a lot to James. It means a lot to myself, Richard, and Raphael as well. And also wanted to let you guys know that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, where you can win money on the playoffs, the NBA or NHL, or if you love baseball, check out the baseball offerings there too. It's awesome, and they will take care of you using code LOCKEDONNBA. So James and I are going to rank who we believe are the most likely to players to be all-stars from this class that is considered to be devoid of stars. So that's where I'll turn it over to you. Every draft has had stars, whether it's been a good draft or a bad draft. Where do you think the stars are coming from in this draft?
I want to say the most obvious, and again, it's obvious not because of where he may be drafted at, just because of like talent and, whether it be the fans vote him in or just the right situation. But I'm going to go with Rob Dillingham, just because based off his style of play, he screams all-star potential. And it's a new guard. It's a new day in the NBA. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, you know what? I don't know if you can rank anybody in their 30s as a top 5 player in the NBA. So even with that said, in 3 or 4 years, who knows where Steph is going to be? Who knows where some of these other guys are going to be? All-star spots may open up. And I think if Rob Dillingham is in the right situation, especially with his style of play, I think he has the most he screams like the most all-star ready guy or all-star talent in this draft so far.
I'm actually right there with you. I said to Richard yesterday, if you're going to look at it numerically, I think he's the most likely player to be scoring 21, 22 points, 7 assists, and that puts you in the conversation. I've likened him, and this is nothing novel for those of you who've listened to this podcast before, or if you're listening to Locked On Jazz, and I've been doing kind of prospect breakdowns. He reminds me to have a slightly watered down game of Trae Young with the effectiveness of Darius Garland. Darius Garland is a one-time all-star who I think is actually being hampered by playing alongside Donovan Mitchell right now. Not because Donovan's not a great player. He is. I just don't think he helps the other players in the backcourt very much. And even the bigs, I don't think are fed the ball in the same way they would be if Garland had the reins. I think Donovan's a better player than Garland. I want to make that clear for those of you who may be listening. But Garland's an all-star talent, and he's been an all-star. But I think Dillingham's got more juice than Garland, and he's got really good shooting numbers. I think some of the questions coming into the year about Dillingham were, can he really shoot the ball at this level? Like, will there be bad shots? Are they all heat checks? And he took a few, but he shot 45% from 3. He was 50% on catch and shoots. He's really good in pick and roll, and that's all with college spacing. And granted, Kentucky shot it well. I'm fully aware of that. But that's still college spacing. You get NBA spacing around a guy who has the ball in his hands, I think that's the guy who's the logical first place to be an all-star. If you're asking me what's most likely and potential, I think he's probably one for me on both. And I've got him in my top 2, and I'm like razor thin difference between he and Alex Sarr. But I like Dillingham's potential more.
100% agree. It just, if he lands in the right situation, and then in my mind, I've been trying to peg him to San Antonio for some time. You land in San Antonio, you're automatically going to get the Wembanyama stimulus package, defensively, votes. I just feel like, he's my favorite player in the draft, and I see him being the all-star, like you said, the Darius Garland comp. I've said that since the first time that I watched him. And I see it, and I think he's going to have a very bright future in this league.
Yeah, let me ask one follow-up on Dillingham before we go to the next guy. Mm-hmm. If Dillingham's not in San Antonio, and I'm not saying you pick a specific team, but obviously Wembanyama is a great pick-and-roll partner. He's got pick and pop. Does Dillingham need to have a pick-and-roll style offense, or what do you think he could do if he said, "Hey, you're the lead scorer," and obviously there's gonna be some pick and roll, but like we're just gonna kind of space it out and attack. Do you think he could thrive in that, or is he specific to system in the sense that you need him attacking pick and roll to help him as a facilitator?
I want to say I would like to see him in a heavy pick and roll offense, just in the role in general, because while I am a huge fan of his, I do feel like he needs to improve his finishing at the rim, his percentages at the rim. But if you catch, on a given night, you're going to catch that big and drop coverage. So I think with his shooting ability off the dribble, him and pick and roll is going to be really, really good. I was just thinking about it, and it'll be interesting to see where Detroit ends up in this lottery and what they decide to do. I know Cade has had, for him, he's had success as the lead ball handler, but next to Ivy, they haven't had much success because of, Ivy's turnovers and shooting ability even kind of in question. I wonder if Dillingham in Detroit is an option. That's something that they look at. I think if Washington's there, I think you give him the keys if he lands in Washington. So the draft, the way that the lottery looks, got the really bad teams. I think he's going to have an opportunity to just showcase, but also with him being such a deadly guy off the dribble, he's going to need some shooting around him. So maybe Detroit isn't the best fit, but you give him a screen, I think he's going to be great. Because like I said, his shooting off the dribble is phenomenal at 19, and it should only get better.
I agree. I think he's going to be a monster in pick and roll, especially with a big that can short roll or be a lob guy, because the bigs at Kentucky had talent but weren't necessarily conducive to Rob Dillingham's game. So we both are on board Dillingham as most potential. I also think he's probably the most likely to be an all-star. And we'll start getting into that. Who would be next in terms of potential or most likely to be an all-star for you? You can take it whichever way you want and maybe differentiate the two if the answer is different.
This is a really, really tough question because, there's the Dillingham, obviously, he jumps off the screen, right? But the rest of these guys, it's like all-star potential, all-star talent is, if this happens, then I can see it. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So it's like, if this happens, then sure. If this doesn't happen, then sure. I am a huge Dillingham fan, and I've been also a big Stephon Castle fan as well. I think he has all-star potential. I feel like I don't want to say dumbed it down, but he played his role at Connecticut. Now you can argue, that was the role he was best, based on because of his limitations. But I feel like in a different situation, I think he may be a better basketball player. And it's kind of hard to, say that a guy who won an NCAA championship as a freshman, as a key role, in a key role, has more to offer at a different level. But I feel like just watching his high school tape, I like his handle, I like his pace. I know people say he's the fastest guy, or they doubt his speed off the dribble, but I'm not really concerned about your speed with the ball. It's important, but I just see a crafty ball handler who has he takes the right in-between game shots. I like his floater, and I think the shooting will improve. I just think that he says, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. I can't come in and rock the ship on a team that won a national championship last year. I'm going to play a role. So I think Stephon Castle has all-star potential. And on top of that, I feel like things go right 5 years from now. You know what? That was the best player in this draft.
So the one pause I have on Castle, because I liked him out of high school too, would be, and you alluded to it, it's like Andre Jackson played that exact role, and he went to a UConn, and their team was different. I understand that, but largely based on the same principles. And he perfected a role that was used to maximize a junior who had deficiencies. And so you say, he played the role perfectly. But I wonder if he was maximized because it was a perfect role that was already founded on how Andre Jackson played. And so estimating a player that played his role as well as he did, but the role was created for a player with deficiencies in Andre Jackson, I wonder how much you can have faith of that guy being your on-ball player, because the only way he's an all-star to me is if he's on the ball all the time. And his shooting numbers are staggeringly bad according to top 10 compared to other top 10 players. I actually have less worry about that. I think he can get better. His shot doesn't look broken to me. I don't think he'll ever be a great shooter, but I think he can be serviceable. But I just don't know about his scoring ability in terms of putting up a ton of numbers. I think he'd be a useful player, but the all-star potential is lower for me. I think he's a safer pick rather than one with a lot of potential.
I get what you're saying. I just, watching this film in high school, and high school's obviously not the NBA, but like he had great change of speed off the dribble. And I feel like he's a very good ball handler. And like, I think, again, when you come into that situation, all right, we got Tristan Newton. He's a fifth-year guy. We have great shooting in Caravan and forget the name off the top of my head.
Cam Spencer.
Yeah, Spencer. And it's like, why would I come in and mess this up? You look crazy messing this up.
Yep.
So I feel like there is more to it. I feel like there's some Jimmy Butler to his game. And I just think in the right situation, like I think he can turn it on. And it's going to be more of a so like if you look at Jimmy Butler, right? What Jimmy Butler's physical attributes do not jump off the screen at all. He's got alligator arms, not the fastest guy. He's 6'7", but he gets to his spots. And like when I was scouting Castle early on, I'm like, you know what? An 18-year-old kid that gets to his spots like that and understands middle game, get to the basket is rare. Most of the guys at that age are I'm a great athlete or I'm a great shooter. And he just kind of understands. So like I could be wrong, I might be wrong, but I'm still gonna hold on to his stock as you know what, he did not show you the full package at UConn. And it made sense not to.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. And coming up next, we're going to continue discussing and debating who has the best chance of becoming all-stars. Is it different between potential and likelihood in this case? Because this is a class that's drafting for pieces as opposed to drafting the dude. So we're going to continue discussing that coming up next. But first, let me tell you guys about BetterHelp. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes all we need is the opportunity to get something off of our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. For example, I can tell you about how I really and truly feel about who my favorite team, the Utah Jazz, should draft. But sometimes it's not all that, and it's not always all that simple on what's on someone's mind. And you need an unbiased audience all the same to listen to you and help you out. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible, and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Welcome back to Locked on NBA Big Board. And by the way, I just got a question for you guys. Are you guys watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked on Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without bringing all that screaming. Locked on Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube and on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked on podcast, your team every day. All righty, so we were discussing a few guys at the top that are not too surprising, but who's up next? I mean, both of us have talked about, and the last time we talked about my big board, we talked about Alex Sarr as one of the top guys. I talked to Richard about how he wasn't as high on my all-star candidacy, so I'm not calling you crazy whatsoever. I'm actually right there with you. But explain to me why the guy that is the presumptive number one on my board, I believe number one on your board, in Alex Sarr is not as high in the all-star likelihood and or potential.
I think the path to be an all-star big is tougher than it is for a guard. And it's not necessarily because of, I still think Sarr is the number one player, as you mentioned. I just feel like the path, forecasting where we are today in 2024, 5 years from now, it's just a little tougher. It's like to be an all-star big, you need to be in the right, you need to be a scoring machine and defend at a high level. And I feel like Sarr, that would be like a best case scenario. He hasn't showed like ridiculous upside as a scorer. Like I think he's the best piece to build, to add to a roster in this draft. But it would be like to me a team success thing if he is in all stars. Like he's not the ball handling for like Paolo Banchero is, right? He's not the low post threat like Embiid or any of these other guys are. So it's like I have him maybe probably third in that, and I know he does have a lot of talent, a lot of potential. The jump shot comes along, great athlete, but it's just hard. So again, if we sit here and say he has Evan Mobley-like tendencies, right? In what way do we see Evan Mobley as an all-star?
Well, you just stole my exact train of thought. That was exactly what I was going to ask you.
Man,
Uh,
Leif.
Evan Mobley, I said the same thing to Richard yesterday. Evan Mobley's like a 16-8, 16-9 guy. Granted, Jared Allen's playing the 5, so you could argue his stats could be a little bit better if he
Right.
were in a different situation. But the numbers are what they are, and you can't make those up. And he's on a good team, and he's an impactful player. But I think at the same point, if I were to go back 3 years and it was Jalen Green and it was Cade Cunningham and Mobley, I had Mobley 2 coming out of that class. I would have taken Mobley out of college, out of USC over Sarr this year. And so if you're going to take 3 years of Mobley being a very good NBA player, but nowhere near an all-star, that's the exact reason why I'm a little bit pessimistic about Sarr's upside. And so that's why I think his likelihood is a little lower than some of the other players. But that said, the reason he's number 1 for me is because he does a lot of things that impact winning basketball. And while you were talking and you were making the same pitch I was going to make about Mobley, let me ask you about a player that I think is different. But Jaren Jackson has made an all-star. He won a defensive player of the year. That's another player he's liking to. I don't see it as much as I see Mobley. And then the other one would be Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren, I think, is going to have a difficult case to make all-star games because Victor Wembanyama is there, because Nikola Jokic is there. But I think he's still a better player. So I think you're just playing a numerical game, and that's his issue. But if you were to rank, let's say, 30 players in 5 years, is there a likelihood that Sarr's there? It's just that he's in a positional, like, kind of, it's hard to break through against the Bam Adebayos, even those type of players, along with the superstars and Wembanyama, Embiid, and Jokic.
I 100% agree. And it's like, I think Chet will be an all-star. Let me think. Chet should be an all-star next year because obviously fans, sometimes the media, they're a year behind on these things, right? So you think they keep trending the way they are, there should be top 3 again next year. He's an all-star just off the strength of, well, shoot, it'll be hard because are they going to get 3 all-stars with obviously Shea, and then you say Jalen Williams, he's on that same, like, it's hard to crack that, especially even on good teams because, like, you know, it's just it's so many guys. But in a situation where you tell me he's Evan Mobley like production wise, that's still hard to become an all-star, especially in the West, because, you know, if LeBron plays 2-3 more years, that spot is gone, you know, so it'd be tough. Let me pivot and ask you a question. Who do you have, or if do you have an irrational, he's not a top 10 guy, but somehow I can see him an all-star in this draft?
I've actually got a few of those. You want to do that the next segment? I got one more main.
Oh yeah, okay, we'll say that. Go ahead.
Yeah, we got a kind of a long shot one coming up next, but I got one more to kind of hash out with you.
Okay.
Do you think? So we talk about Ron Holland. I think he's one of those guys who's got a higher ceiling than a higher floor. And then there's Nikola Topic, who I think if everything hits, his jump shot being the main swing skill, I think he could be the best player in the class. How do you feel about those two guys kind of rounding out top 5, 6 for a lot of people's boards and their chances of being an all-star? Like, is it more possible, or is it more based on potential on those guys?
So again, I'm higher on Ron than I think the consensus. Me and you agree. I have Ron 3.
As do I.
So at the same time, I think if Ron goes to a bad situation, which he has no control over, I think that could hurt him. Because at the same time, is he getting the opportunity he's getting the reps. We know he can be productive, but is he going to learn how to play winning basketball? And that concern isn't, I'm not blaming him for the G League Ignites, you know, whatever, lack of success. It's just that he had to transition from playing the 4 in high school to the 3. So now the 3 in the NBA is obviously different than it is from the G League. So will he be able to develop new habits, good habits in a tough situation, learning a new position? That would be my biggest, you know, thing that would be stopping him from being an all-star. Now, if he landed in like Memphis somehow, right, and they were like, hey, man, we don't need to run any plays for you. You just go out there, be athletic, learn how to play defense at this level, you know, play off of those other guys. Again, I know they have guys there, but like, I think in that situation, maybe not Memphis, but a team that has more talent, I think he has an opportunity. But Topic that's another tough one too, because again, the playmaking's there, but it's going to boil down to, is he going to be, if he can't shoot, he's like Josh Giddey, right? You can't really play him the whole 36, 34, whatever, how many minutes you want to play. But if he does develop that jump shot, is he, I mean, you know, I've seen Goran Dragic comparisons. I believe Dragic was an all-star. If not, he was definitely a borderline all-star for a lot of years in Miami. Just one of those guys that was really good. So,
yeah, I'm with you. I think Holland has to go to a team that cultivates like the basketball fundamentals and teaches him like to embrace the innate traits he has as a defender, and then the offensive game will come. I think it might be a slower process for him. I don't think he's immediately popping out as this amazing player after 1-2 years. Topic, just a statistic for you guys: 89th percent in the pick and roll. So that's why I have faith that there's a chance he can become this really excellent player. Because if he's a pick and roll savant, 6'6", and he shoots 88% from the free throw line, there's a chance his scoring numbers are good and he's able to bend the game with the quick decision making that we applaud him for. And he's young and he's played professional basketball. So that type of player I tend to like. But I do have concerns about his shot, even though he shot 88 from the line. It's a very rigid shot. It almost reminds me of like Ricky Rubio was a really good free throw shooter, but it wasn't a very good shooter. And I feel like he kind of tricks people who are like, oh, you know, the common tool to evaluate shooting is free throw shooting. I think he's a little gimmicky in that regard. So I have concern, but I think if that pans out, that's one of the biggest swing skills in the draft.
You know who else was like that? John Wall.
Yeah.
John Wall was high 80s from the free throw line, I think, for the majority of his career, but you were always going underneath the screens. We're still going to go underneath. He's got to beat me from the 3-point line. And he became respectable, but it was never – it was that was stopping him from, like, taking that Wizards team to the next level.
Yeah, I agree. So next up on the last segment on the horizon, let's talk about those long shots that James was eager to get to, and I am as well. I've got two of them that I think are interesting, and I'm curious to see what James thinks. Richard was shocked by both of them. Let's see if James has few that, if everything happens perfectly, could be all-stars that aren't necessarily top 10 guys. But first, let me tell you about a slam dunk prospect rather than the long shots we're talking about, and that's DoorDash. Want to make mom smile? Start Mother's Day with flowers or surprise her with gifts from brands she loves, delivered with the very same day with DoorDash. DoorDash is more than just the great food delivery. For instance, does mom have a sweet tooth? Is she a tech enthusiast, a beauty connoisseur, or is she outdoorsy? No matter what she's into, you can make her smile with a fruit or flower bouquet, makeup, tech gear, workout gear, and much, much more. Shop with savings that would make her proud. With a Dash Pass membership, you'll save with a $0 delivery fee and reduced service fees on eligible orders from Dash Pass. Merchants that meet this minimum subtotal, other fees, including the service fee, do apply. Terms apply. But get all your Mother's Day gifts all to be in one place. And that's the best part. It's all convenient. You can get it all in one place. Get 50% off with your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order. Now with code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order today using DoorDash. DoorDash today. Terms apply. And DoorDash is wonderful. Couldn't advertise it more. So welcome back. And I'm really eager to see who you've got. I think I know one of the guys you're going to mention. I got a guess. But we're talking about guys that likely won't be picked in the top 10 that we think have an all-star chance. And I made this pitch that in 2013, which was considered a bad draft, that you found Giannis at 15, Rudy Gobert at 27, and Oladipo was the third all-star, who had one all-star appearance, was the second pick. Every draft, good or bad, has had multiple all-stars. So likely the case that you're going to find ones a little bit later. So I'm going to turn it over to you, James. Who is the guy that you're going to find outside that top 10? That's the hidden gem, the dandy.
All right, so let's do it like I'm going to name one and then you name one, and then I'll name another. All right, so outside the top 10, and I don't necessarily feel like this is a really, really big stretch. I'm not going to I don't feel like I should blow minds with this one. But I think if everything works out well, I think Isaiah Kyer could be an all-star 5-10 years down the line.
I agree. At the end of yesterday's episode, every Dayers would have heard that I mentioned him as someone that just because he was number one player in the country out of high school, used to having the ball in his hands. If things work out, I could see it. So I said that one as well. My guy that I made the real pitch saying he's the most similar to Giannis, which obviously I'm not expecting to be Giannis, would be Tijan Salaun. I think that it's very likely he is not an all-star. I want to preface that. Like, I'm not saying he is absolutely an all-star. I'm not putting my foot down. But my pitch would be that he's big. He's 6'9". He's 200 pounds. He's fluid athletically. At times this year, he's up to about 39% from three early in the season. End of the season, slowing down about 32, 33% from three. I don't think he's a great shooter, but the fact that he had the confidence to shoot him, the shot looks all right. He's 83% from the free throw line. Defensively, he's got instincts and length that make him valuable on that side, and he's got the coordination and fluidity that I think you can teach to be more than what he is right now. If you were to look at Bilal Coulibaly around a similar time in this process, he didn't start ramping up boards till his late season push playing in the French playoffs. Like right now, Bilal Coulibaly in May was probably 20th on like the highest person's board at that point. Then by the end of May, early June, and maybe even mid-June, he became a top 15. And then at the very end, he ends up going 7th to the Wizards. So I'm not saying that he has that exact same trajectory, but I think he's probably ahead of the curve of where Bilal Coulibaly, who ended up 7th, was here. He's bigger than Coulibaly, and his numbers were throughout the regular season more impressive. Granted, a little bit lower of a level team, but playing professional basketball, young player, big body, fluidity, and the shots a little further along than the many that are typically considered projects. So that would be my pitch. Like I said, long shot, but that's the one I think is most similar to the archetype of Giannis.
He, good and bad, does not know what he's doing. Yes. Right? So good because he's not afraid, right? He knows how to shoot and he's going to shoot the ball. Bad, I've seen him make moves off the dribble, and I'm like, why did you step that way? Why did you dribble with that hand? He is somebody who's been up and down on my board. Depending on when you watch him, it's like, man, that dude he's talented. And then another day, you're like, man, he has no clue how to play basketball. But again, that's what this draft is. Like, if I'm gonna pick somebody, let me see if I can figure it out. He's like an OKC guy to me. I know they just drafted a similar guy in him as Ousmane Dieng.
Yeah, but I can't unsee him either when I watch him.
Ousmane Dieng. I was talking to my brother on the podcast. I think he had like 3 blocks all year in like 200 minutes, something crazy. Where it's like, dude, you're 6'11". How are you not like getting an accidental block? It's something crazy. All right, so my next one, I think I have 3 of them for you, time permitting. All right, so. And this is a guy, my brother's really, really high on him. He has all the talent in the world, and it's just still something missing. But I'm gonna go with Kel'el Ware. As somebody's like, you know what? If he figures it out, if he can just consistently show you what you need to see, he has all-star talent. And I'm gonna stand on that one.
I don't disagree with that statement at all. I actually, when Kel'el Ware was coming out of high school, I did a podcast with Raphael, and he was talking about which guys have the most potential. And I was low on Ware, and I was like, look, man, I watch him and I want to see it, but I just I don't see him making the impact that I want, like a big time recruit, a top 10 pick the next year to be. And so then we had a podcast at the end of the next year, and I was like, okay, well, Ware is going to be one of those coveted transfers, but there's a reason he's not actually going in this draft. That said, I think talent-wise, you're absolutely right. Like, if you're taking a shot, he's definitely one to take a shot on. I think he improved his talent-wise. I think the shot, his shot should be good. I don't think it was all that great. I don't think Indiana was a great fit. But without getting into semantics, I think he's a top 20 pick in this draft. Talent-wise, he's probably a top 7 talent. So I agree with your logic there. I wouldn't have thought of him just because when I watch him play basketball, there's something left to be desired, and I don't like that like unfulfilled feeling. So I got one more that I'll package them together because I think they're similar, and I think you actually like both these guys. One of them would be Jalen Tyson.
Yes.
And Richard brought him up, and then my pitch would be he's just solid at a lot of things. When he was playing as kind of a 3-and-D guy early in his career in his 2 stops in Texas and Texas Tech, he was a 3-and-D guy who knocked down a high percentage of threes. He defended. He was seen as more of an athlete, though he wasn't like the most explosive guy in the world. He was seen more as a 3-and-D athlete. Then he goes to Cal and he refined his game. Became probably the most valuable player to their team in the Pac-12 conference. I saw tons of him because I live in the Pac-12 footprint. Rest in peace, Pac-12. That breaks my heart, but I'll carry through. I see him as a player who has the skill set that's refined enough to be a good player, that if he's given a good situation, I probably see him as more of like a really good role player. But I could see a world that breaks just right in which he's able to elevate, take that next step and score. And the other guy is a similar pitch, but he's younger in his development curve, and that's Keyshawn George. Keyshawn George has the ball in his hands a fair amount. He knows how to make plays. He's not a tremendous athlete in terms of foot speed, but he's a very fluid 6'7", almost 6'8", can shoot the ball with confidence, makes plays as a passer. And that type of archetype's rare in today's NBA at the age and the stature he possesses. So if I'm going to take some shots in the dark, those would be guys. Not that Tyson's as much of a shot in the dark as he played more, but George would be a guy that I would bank on skill set and size.
All right, let me ask you a question. I'm putting you on the spot. We are unrehearsed. Is there anybody in the second round? There'll never be another Nikola Jokic, right? There'll never be another. I wouldn't say never, but we've seen Jokic, we've seen Gilbert Arenas, we've seen Manu. There's a long list of guys who are second-round picks, and they end up being really, really good basketball players. Do you see that in this draft? There's somebody in the second round who's super, super under the radar, where you could be like, you know what? I got a feeling about him. Maybe some stuff swings the right way. He could be a really, really good basketball player.
There's guys
dig deep for me, Leif. Dig deep.
There's guys I like. Picking them to be that good is hard. Okay, hey, I got two players that I don't think all-star is what I see, but I think they have far better skill sets than they're advertised for in terms of where they're projected on boards. I have Carlton Carrington, also known as Bub Carrington, and then Trey Alexander. Trey Alexander he's a known commodity. He's a Creighton Blue Jay, and I watch him, and everyone says, well, he's not that good of a shooter, or he's not that good at all these things. He's really good at just about everything. Like, he played the point guard. He's probably a 2 guard. He's got a 6'10" wingspan, guarded the best perimeter players for Creighton, handled a lot of responsibility scoring, developed as a passer, and he shoots off the dribble shots. He's already got a super refined mid-range game. Like, if you were to look at mid-range game, he might have the best in this class. He gets to the mid-range. He uses the hostage dribble or the shield dribble, and he creates shots for himself. He found lob threats in Kalkbrenner. He knows how to play with shooters. And Carrington, back to him, he's a freshman who went to Pittsburgh. He just is really skilled, and he's a pretty sizable guard that's ahead of the curve development-wise. He just didn't shoot the ball very well. I believe you can shoot if you have the confidence to take those shots that he was permitted to take and encouraged to take by Pittsburgh. So those would be the two that I would take as I don't truly believe they have all-star potential, but like if I were to find one, that would be the guy. And I wonder if I know who you're going to take, but I don't see him as highly as some others do.
So I'm going to go completely left field with mine. I'm a big Bub Carrington fan, so you don't have to sell me on him, right? I like Trey Alexander. I wish he shot the 3 ball off the dribble, but that's something you can learn, I feel. But I wonder, and this is just me wondering, does a team look at AJ Johnson, understanding he has the physical? He's not strong, obviously, but he's like 6'6". He can handle. He's an athlete. He was in Australia. Nobody saw him play unless you're really, really digging into it. Do you say, you know what? In 3 years, I can make something of him?
I like that one. See, when I made my board, I stopped it at 30, except for college players. So I didn't have him there, but I have seen him play. I just haven't watched enough to like have a proper evaluation. So I didn't even think of him. But I will say, when I watched him play prior to when he went to Australia, there was like this, okay, he's untapped. Like the ball of clay is not molded whatsoever, but there's pieces you can work with. Well, now he's become molded into something that I think has that potential as his game becomes more refined and redefined. Not only was he just like this athlete that would only kind of play sporadically early, I think he's found a way to play basketball in a manner that makes sense for the role that you anticipate he plays in the NBA. So I really like that one. I actually liked his chances more than the two I mentioned. But like I said, when I made my board, I decided like I'm not going to start just randomly putting in names of people I haven't watched as much. So I just kept my second round all collegiate players. But I actually really like him. I wouldn't be surprised if someone takes a shot on him at 25 to 30.
Interesting.
And I got one more. This is a real shot in the dark because I think he
Okay.
returns to school. But I think if he returns to school, he's a top 10 pick next year. So this is a guy that you'd just be getting a year in advance. It would be like kind of what they did with Josh Primo, and he actually goes to the same school as Josh Primo went to, and that's going to be Jaron Stevenson. I love Jaron Stevenson. I've talked to Raphael about this probably for 6 months. I think Jaron Stevenson is the player that Alabama needed if they wanted to beat UConn. He just wasn't. Like, he's not strong enough physically. Like, what they needed was someone to space out and take Caravan off the dribble. And Nelson was asked to do a lot, and he played all right in that game, but he just couldn't live up to what he did against Carolina. If Stevenson had more confidence, maybe more physical strength, he could space a player out, create from the 4 spot, and expose the weakest of the defenders. Caravan's actually not a bad defender, but he's the weakest of UConn's individual defenders, and you could expose that with a unique skill set. The ability to shoot was questionable. Like, he had one good tournament game where he shot a lot of threes, hit 5 of them, but he didn't have a ton of confidence because he played with veteran guys. I think you got a 6'9" guy who can rebound the ball, can put the ball on the floor, knock down shots, and that aren't only catch and shoots, but I think he can do it off the dribble, and that's just super rare at the size. So he's a guy I have top 10. I'm just playing my cards early for next year. So if you guys remember this, just watch out for Jaron Stevenson. But if he stays in this draft and my Utah Jazz have a chance of taking him at 29, I will be praying they take him.
I like that, man. Sometimes you got to go against the grain. You got to reach, because I don't think that some of these GMs are thinking differently from us. Like, if you feel like you got to keep these guys, the AJ Johnsons, the Jaron Stevens, you got to keep those close to the vest, because if you figure something out 3 years ahead of everyone else, like, you look like the genius. I feel like just last thing before we go, the numbers, and this is like, I guess this is like homework for you. So when you watch AJ Johnson, it's going to be some ugly stuff, but I feel like the experience helped him. The stats don't tell the story.
I agree with that. I think there's a lot of players like that, actually, where their numbers, you look at their 3-point shooting, you're like, well, he can't shoot, therefore he's not good at this role. But you don't know the context. A lot of people don't. So I think that's very fair. And I also think that players that play pro basketball are overly criticized for their inefficiency because they're young playing professional basketball. And so I tend to sympathize with those guys. So this has been a really fun discussion. We've talked about the ranking, the all-star potential. We took a few deep shots at the little Hail Marys.
You stretch, drink some water, man, after that.
Exactly. Like, once we get out there talking ball, you never know when we're going to stop. So hopefully you guys enjoyed, but also I know you guys will enjoy this. Locked On has launched their first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find out Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV's channels app. So thank you guys for listening. With your next listen to Locked On NBA, just Locked On NBA, and they're going to talk about the playoffs. Anthony Edwards is brilliant. But thank you guys for listening, and thank you, James, for talking to me about some ball and some deep shots and give me a little homework assignment. I love a little homework assignment.
Yeah, man, it's been a pleasure, man. Looking forward to the next time.
All righty. Well, we'll be back. I think it's Richard Stamen and James up next, but I'll be back with you guys shortly, and I'll be back at the Combine. So thank you guys for listening, and tune in next time.